It's our pleasure. So next gen security. This week, of course, everyone who's coming in town is talking about, arms kind of procurement in a sense. And of course, your title says arms control. How are you thinking about this week? What are your priorities?
Well, thanks for the question, and really great to be here. I think this is a great opportunity to find ways we can continue to work with our NATO partners and allies on so many important issues. I know we've talked about a lot of this, and we've heard a lot about this today, but for me, it's an opportunity to reinforce the importance of the alliance, the importance of all the new challenges that we're facing in the international security space. And of course, emerging technologies is one of those areas where we have to continue to find ways to work together, because the only way we're going to be really able to address a lot of the challenges we have today is by working with partners and allies. And so this is an opportunity to really reinforce that importance.
Now, especially for the allies in Europe who have a real ongoing war to deal with, how much bandwidth are they able to give to emerging technologies? And how are you working with them to assist them in that process?
There's a real interest in emerging technologies and working with partners because, as I said, a recognition that so much of this is new. And so each country individually is trying to address these issues, but we also know that, as an alliance, we need to figure out how we can try to prevent unfortunate things from happening in the future. So a lot of the work that I do and my bureaus do, I have 3 bureaus that work underneath me. One is called the Arms Control, Deterrence, and Stability Bureau. The other one is Political Military Affairs, and the third is International Security and Non-Proliferation. All 3 of those bureaus are looking at these issues of emerging technologies, particularly not only how we can protect technologies, but also prevent in non-state actors and countries with intent to do harm from manipulating and using these technologies in an unfortunate way.
There's a real worry when we think about emerging technologies like AI, and we can dive into that a little bit more. But before we do that, I often get the sense that we're creating a world of haves and have-nots with many of these new emerging technologies. Some of it is access to the right kind of hardware, whether it's chips. Some of it is software and talent. And America clearly has this incredible advantage on each of those things. How are you thinking about working with countries that are not traditional U.S. allies? What does that look like?
Thank you. And that's a really important point, that we have to be able to ensure that technology is available for all countries and that it is not a have and have not situation. A lot of the work that we do, for example, at State Department is what we call promote, which is to find ways that we can work with different countries to understand what their goals are, what their ideals are, where can we work together on issues of emerging technologies. So there's a whole promote side, and we recognize the importance of working with countries around the world, particularly like-minded countries. And then on the other side, there's what I refer to as the prevent and protect side, where we understand that we don't want a world to be have and have-nots, and that countries have to have access to these type of technologies.
Define like-minded countries.
There are countries who understand the importance of responsible behavior, countries who recognize that we want to be able to use these type of technologies in a positive way to promote democracy, to promote international law, the rule of law, responsible behavior, to not do something that's discriminatory in any way. So countries that have these kind of ideals and want to use technologies in a very positive way that allows for free-flowing information are the kinds that we want to be continuing to work with.
Yeah. I mean, basically, every country on earth would like to think of itself in that way if you read their own versions of what an international order looks like. But then let's move to the prevent side. So the countries that you are defining as not like-minded, on AI, for example, how are you thinking about making sure that, as you develop cutting-edge things, as you share them with allies, how do you prevent the people who shouldn't be getting their hands on it? That stuff.
Right. So in the context of the work that goes on in my bureaus, which are all, most of the work within my 3 bureaus are prevent and protect, those some promote, which is really done by a different part of State Department. We have a couple things that we do. For example, one is we have a declaration called AI and the Military and Autonomy. And what this is we're working with 55 countries and hopefully more to promote responsible use of AI in the military. And so we've had a meeting with them earlier this year. They set up a number of working groups, and we're increasing the number of countries going to work with us to make sure that as countries use AI in the military, that they're using it in a responsible way. On the other side, some of the other things we're doing is more related to like export controls. And, building on existing export controls that we have, how can we adjust those export controls to find how we can prevent countries who intend to use things in a very nefarious way from using those things in a nefarious way. And so we're working with a number of countries on that. And as I said, and I started out with, so much of this has to be done in a multilateral way. And so we're working with countries to understand what each country goals are, our ideals are, what we're thinking about in terms of how we're using the military, AI in the military, but in other ways to make sure that we prevent and protect countries, protect what we have, but also make sure we prevent misuse, as we do in many ways with export controls, for example.
Where does space fit into this for you right now? How concerned are you?
Well, I mean, everybody's been aware of the concerns that we've had with Russia and potential use of space for nefarious uses of nuclear. And so we are also, the State Department and Commerce is working together to see, again, are there export controls that we can use in that space in terms of technology? But also we are working in a multilateral way with other countries, again, to help ensure that there is a understanding that we cannot be using nuclear technology in terms of nefarious ways, nuclear weapons or anything like that in space. So the work that we tried to do at the UN, trying to get a resolution on that, which only failed because we had Russia, which went against it. But what that did is galvanize a lot of interest in countries to really focus on space and technology that could be used to make space a domain that's not safe.
There are a few terms that have come up a fair bit in this conversation now. There's like-minded countries and therefore not like-minded countries. And then there's export controls. And it makes me wonder, when you have enough not like-minded countries, they've been called different things of late, the axis of resistance in the Middle East, or whether it's Russia and China, and then the countries that they like to pull into their pool. Doesn't that weaken then the idea of export controls when you have enough bigger countries that are partnering with each other to do, let's use the word nefarious activities in our definition here? How do you control them when they're just operating in a different ecosystem now?
Well, that's why it's so important from the very beginning to bring countries on board in terms of these norms and things that we want to develop. Fortunately, there are more countries that do want to abide by the norms. There's more countries that do want to abide by international law than there are that don't. And so in a diplomatic realm, what you do is you continue to engage countries. As the example of the AI in the military effort, it started out as an idea, and then we have been working to bring more countries in from around the world, not just from any particular region, from all countries around the world, to agree on this norm. And you develop this norm, and the more countries that join the norm, the more countries that you can say believe that this is the right way to go, this is the right way to be. Now, you'll always have countries who don't want to abide and want to do their own thing. But the idea is to have as many countries as possible, sign on to agreements or sign on to the norms building or go to the UN General Assembly and agree or something like that. That's how you do it. You build it, one by one, country by country, to develop these type of norms. And when you have something like emerging technologies, which is new and developing, you need to do this now. You need to do it not only with countries, you need to do it with private sector, you need to do it with industry. You need to be having these conversations with all the entities that are involved in these type of issues.
So here's a difficult question. Every time I travel to, Asia or Africa, I hear a very familiar narrative from leaders there, and it goes something like this. The rules-based order could work if America followed all the rules. And there's a growing sense that America's broken a lot of rules, whether you think of the unilateral invasion of Iraq, more recently, not being a signatory of the ICC, for example, calling for the ICC to sanction Putin but not Netanyahu. You can agree or disagree with any of the politics around this, but that is the refrain that we often hear among leaders in the Global South. I'm not disputing what you're saying, but how do you convince in this new world of emerging tech where you want to build norms and rules for AI and quantum, how do you tell your interlocutors that we may have broken rules ourselves in the past, but we're not going to do it in the future with this?
Yeah. Well, I think what the thing you have to do is make it very, we have our own domestic politics, and sometimes, a lot of times countries understand our politics more than we understand our politics. But there are treaties, for example, that we still have not ratified that we would like to ratify. There are,
such as?
There's a number of, what we call nuclear weapons free zones that we need to get through Congress. There's a comprehensive nuclear test ban treaty that we need to get through Congress. There's things that we need to do that unfortunately we're not able to do for various reasons.
Right. And from the outside, it does not seem like a priority.
Yeah, but, we have said many times, for example, in the CTBT example, that it is a priority for the administration. So there's the reality of politics. There's a reality that that there are things that we would, at least this administration, we would like to see not be a problem or that we're not getting out of. And so there is that domestic issue that we have to deal with, but at the same time, we want to also encourage, not only domestically, but internationally, to do the right thing. So we have our struggles domestically, try to do the right thing, try not to withdraw from things that we don't think we should withdraw from, but we have a challenge internationally as well. So it's something we have to do on both sides. You can't say, you don't want to sit here and say, well, we haven't done everything right, so we can't go out and promote what we think is right. We have to recognize it's both sides. It's a struggle both ways. Yeah.
So in a week like this one, where so much of the focus is about 2% military spending as the floor and not the ceiling, war is back, right? I mean, in a big way, on 2 continents and more. And I think leaders have woken up to that, and they're thinking about rearming. They're thinking about security. And I guess for someone like you in your role, do you look at non-proliferation and think, gosh, that moment's past, it's dead?
No, I never think that, because, sometimes we look at the world today and we feel as if this time is different from any other time in the world. In some ways it might be, but in some ways it's not. And, before we are able to make, let's say, an arms control treaty, there were moments where we didn't have the agreement. There were moments where we were fighting to get everyone to the table. So we need to look at this as just a time where we have to redouble our efforts on all these things, whether it's arms control, whether it's non-proliferation. We have to adjust the tools so that they better fit the new security environments that we have. We have a number of countries who are very committed to existing regimes, for example, that are with us and don't want regimes to go away. They want them to be adjusted because they recognize you don't want to be in a situation where you don't have non-proliferation, where you don't have export controls, where you don't have any of these tools. So you have to adjust the tools. You have to sit and recognize that there are changes in the security environment, and we have to stick with it. We can't give up. We have to, because these things are still important, even if you have a different challenge. It's Russia 1 minute, for example, and they're still in Ukraine. But the importance of non-proliferation does not change. We just have to realize we have a different challenge, and we still have to permit ourselves the effort to still achieve the goals, which have not changed, which is a world without nuclear weapons, a world without chemical biological weapons, a world where we, have agreements where we can sit around the table and have these kind of conversations. And in the emerging technology field, we got to figure out, how do we deal with this? Well, how do we develop some rules of the road? How do we develop some stability some predictability in an evolving field where you have so many different actors, not just countries, but private sector, academia, think tanks, NGOs. This is a new environment. This is a new technology. So how do we take old ways that we've done it? How do we develop new ways to achieve the same overall goals?
Well, I'm glad you're not giving up, and I'll keep asking you questions about it.
Well, please do.
Thanks so much. Ambassador Bonnie Jenkins, real pleasure as always.
Appreciate it.